7:36, and we are 5 months away from a presidential election, and time is flying. For the first time ever, as we've been telling you, a former president, current presidential candidate, now a convicted felon.
Yeah, with the hush money trial kind of behind him, Donald Trump is now turning his attention to his campaign. And we've invited presidential historian Dan Cassino to join us this morning to share his thoughts on how this trial will go down in the history books. So good morning to you, Dan. Thanks for being with us. So we are curious, what do you think historians will be saying, say, 5 decades from now? Because if you talk to people on the street right now, one person will say, oh, it was a sad day in history yesterday. And then others saying, well, this shows that the justice system works. So how do you see it?
So whenever we're looking at these sort of events, first off, it's really hard to explain this to undergraduates, to our students.
Yeah.
I know we talk about the Clinton administration, the Nixon administration, they think we're making this stuff up.
Right.
So I think the bigger story here, the historians are going to be talking about in 50 years, really is about American institutions. I mean, presidential systems like we have in the U.S. are inherently unstable. They don't normally last as long as the American system has. What's been great about the American system, the reason we've lasted this long, has been because of the institutions underlying our democracy: freedom of the press, freedom of speech, independent judiciary system. And President Trump, former President Trump, has really been pushing against those institutions and those norms. And this is those norms and institutions pushing back a little bit. The question is, what happens? If former President Trump gets reelected, then maybe this doesn't seem like this was that big a deal. If he's not reelected, this looks like the institution's pushing back.
Well, and it's very interesting when you bring up the institutions, too, because the conversation with a lot of the Republicans is that they're a law and order country who are now questioning the law and order of the country and saying the judicial system is broken, and that could have implications down the line in history.
Well, and we're already seeing support for the judicial system declining. So prior to about 2022, about 2/3 of Americans said they trusted the judiciary system. Now that number's around 40%. And we've got lots of Americans say they just don't trust the judiciary system, and they don't trust the police, they don't trust the court system, and that lack of faith in our institutions is a real problem and something that future presidents are really going to have to work hard to correct.
Well, what do you think of Trump calling himself a political prisoner?
You know, he also said he was going to have a rally in Madison Square Garden. And this is something that, you know, has not a great history, right? So the most famous political rallies in Madison Square Garden are, you know, a Bund rally, a pro-Nazi rally in the 1940s, and George Wallace having a rally there in '68. There's no good way to spin this if you're former President Trump. So saying he's a victim, putting himself up as a martyr, that maybe is his best play, but it's only really a play for his base. It's hard to imagine there's that many undecided voters or marginal voters or voters who aren't paying attention yet who are really going to see this as being a positive.
Right, and it's the undecideds that are really going to possibly turn in one way or another here because of the convicted felon terminology now surrounding him, right? It's not a large swath of people that are going to say, I'm not voting for him, or I am now. But when you look at this in its totality, Dan, I guess the question is, where do you see the two parties kind of in the future because of what we're seeing play out on the streets?
You know, I think that former President Trump, the candidate in history he's most like really is Andrew Jackson, someone who came in, totally shook up the party system, changed and challenged all the norms, and afterwards, things kind of went back to normal.
Yeah.
You know, we have new norms, but the parties survived and the parties flourished. You know, as strange as things are right now, all of this has happened before. Not in this exact same way, but America has been here before. There's nothing totally new under the sun.
It's interesting to think about what will happen, depending on whether or not he does end up winning in January, or November rather. I mean, just where will his legacy be? I mean, will this be his legacy, do you think, or it's too soon to tell?
I don't think this particular event is likely to be his legacy. Man, it's going to be overshadowed, certainly history books, by January 6th. But he is a transformational figure in American politics. The question is, what does American politics transform into after him?
So I guess when you look at it, right, the whole conversation now is whether or not he will serve prison and jail time. That is the big question. We had Arthur Adalia on earlier saying he doesn't believe so. Thinks that, but if he does, right, we are in an election year and there is a campaign season underway. So you're the historian. You look back. I was reading about this last night. Found it fascinating. 1920, there's a candidate who campaigned from jail and got a significant. He didn't win, but he got a significant amount of the votes.
Yeah. So that's Eugene V. Debs, the socialist candidate from 1912 until 1920, the most successful socialist candidate in American political history. Got more than 10% of the vote. You campaigned from jail. This is actually a real problem for the Trump campaign. That a lot of voters think you can't run for president if you've been convicted or if you're in jail. Of course you can. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't.
You can't. But the question is, how do you protect somebody who's in jail? There's the whole terminology of Secret Service within a jail system. He'd go to a state prison.
Yeah, no, look, there's all sorts of logistical complications, but this is also something the Trump campaign is going to have to communicate to his voters, because we've got a lot of people saying, oh, well, he can't run anymore. They have to communicate to voters, and that's a real problem with the Trump campaign. They don't want to talk about this. They want to be talking about Joe Biden and claims that Joe Biden has failed the country. The more they're talking about Donald Trump, the worse it is for them.
Yeah, but it seems to be galvanizing his supporters.
It galvanizes his base. We saw his website crash last night with all the supporters coming in to donate money. But the goal isn't to win over Trump supporters. The goal is to win over people who aren't paying attention to the election yet. And if this is the first thing they hear, this is not exactly a persuasive message.
Yeah, I guess, historian hat off, political hat on for a second, Dan. When you look at the timing of it all, the sentencing July 11th, a few days later, July 15th is the convention. He's the nominee regardless. So is the sentencing ever at all going to have an impact on the RNC convention? Just maybe whether or not he's there physically?
Right, but also, what are they talking about at the convention? Because the Republican Party desperately wants to be talking about Joe Biden. And the more we're talking about Donald Trump, the worse it is for them. Talking about Donald Trump is great for him in the primaries when he's trying to win over Republican voters, but in the general election, they need this to be a referendum on Joe Biden in the last 4 years. Joe Biden is not particularly popular. If people are voting for or against Joe Biden, that's bad for Joe Biden. If we're voting for or against Donald Trump, well, he's not that popular either.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Dan Cassino, thank you so much for taking the time to come in today.
Always a pleasure.
Wealth of knowledge you are, Dan.
He's a walking encyclopedia.
Seriously, you are. Our coverage on the fallout of former President Trump's guilty verdict doesn't end here. We have team coverage coming up in our next half hour from the field at Trump Tower in Lower Manhattan. You can find full coverage of Mr. Trump's guilty verdict on our website, pix11.com, and always streaming on Pix11 Plus.